I'm just like,
Woo. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. We see you. Can you see us?
How you doing this morning?
All right. So we are absolutely excited to be on this morning, and we're grateful that we're even on.
Yes.
So many things, right, Jesse?
Yes, the UME Radio app.
Are you ready for the weekend?
Oh, yes, girl. Get your cup of tea and mic check, 1, 2. I am so ready
To inspire, motivate, and educate. Weekends on UME Radio. The sun is up, and so are we.
News, interviews, hot topics. Connect with us. Let us know what's on your mind. Follow, comment, subscribe.
We're everywhere. UME Radio app, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, iTunes, TuneIn, and all other digital platforms. Email us info@umeradio.com. On WhatsApp, 201-503-6731. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all at UME Radio. Follow me, Jessie, on Instagram at ink.jess, that's ink.jess, and on Facebook at Jesselyn Abel, that's JESSELYNE Abel, ABEL.
And follow me, Marsha J, on all social media platforms at official Marsha J. Or you can just check out marshajnow.com.
Weekends on UME Radio with Marsha J and Jessie.
Amplifying the voice of positive influencers.
UME Radio. Positive entertainment 24/7. Subscribe on YouTube and click the notification bell.
Yes.
Morning, guys.
Buenos dias.
Oh, we're so excited for today's episode. It is Weekends with Marsha J and Jessie. Looking forward to a great season. We are inside episode 7 of season 2. And we want to say a big thank you to all of our partners, supporters, listeners, and viewers from all around the world. Thank you so much, guys. We will be having conversations that they'll be a help to you. So please join us in the comment section down below. We know we love that. And if you need any advice or answers to a question to help you grow, leave it also in the comment section, or feel free to email us at info@umeradio.com. It is our hope that this family program will become a resource for you. So be inspired, motivated, and educated. Welcome to Weekends with Marsha J and Jessie on UME Radio. I'm Jessie, and I'm here with my awesome, amazing host,
Marsha J.
And Marsha J. It's March 27th, 2021, and inside part 2 of 2 to a very special edition on the Royals and how the press both positive and negative impacts and how their story is received and interpreted. The time is now 8:52 a.m. in the morning, and thank you again so much for joining us. We are live on YouTube right now, so hello to everyone watching us on YouTube. Please let us know where you guys are tuning in from. We love to connect with you guys, and don't be afraid to leave a comment, question, or a shout out.
Speaking of shout outs, we want you to connect with us online. No matter the platform, we are right there. So we can be heard on the following apps: Apple App Store, Google Play Store, iTunes Podcast, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Google Podcast, Podbean, TuneU, Live 365, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, and Listen Notes, and more to come. All right, so we definitely want you, especially if you're watching on YouTube, to check out the description bar for discounts and specials from our following partners. So we have Google Marketplace, Amazon, Aquasana, Shop Macy's, Shop Simply Wholesale, Incorporate.com, Smarter Loans, Recover Pro, get your e-commerce store. Yes, you can do that too. Start your podcast, refer and earn, and definitely one of my favorites, Rakuten. So let's jump right into looking at what's coming up on today's show.
Yes.
Are you ready? I want you to type ready in the comments. READY, ready. So right after this, we'll be having our devotion. We want to say thank you to our Daily Bread devotional for this content. And our topic will be hosting royalty. Isn't that something? Right? Then right after that, we jump into the news, both the front page of the New York Times, the Caribbean news, and the African news. Part two to our news item this morning will be a very special interview with media mogul, Antigua journalist, Mr. Garfield Burford, and you'll hear more about that on last week we started on the principles of journalism. We're going to go deeper this week. Right after that, we're going to have our inspiration guest or recurring guest, Coach Raquel. And she's going to be looking at 21 ways to deal with negative energy. What's that? All right. Our spotlight today, Jesse, is going to be on the UDMI free ebook. We have been talking about this ebook for weeks, but we still feel like somebody else needs to know about this ebook.
Yeah.
So stop by and we'll be telling you more about that. In our one day at a time living, it's hacks that will save your life. Can I repeat that again? Hacks that will save your life. So you need to listening to that. We've been doing hacks and hacks have been pretty cool for us.
Yeah.
All right. And right after that, we have our DJ top 5. I can't wait to see what's on the list this week. Right? And right after that, we're going to be having Because We Can, and we're going to be looking at the Archwell Foundation Compassion in Action. And our other spotlight feature will be on the UMERADIO schedule. We want you to get to know the station a little bit more. So we're going to be talking some more about what's on our schedule. Definitely at 10 a.m., we have a very special guest, Miss Tani Belafonte, who is a very pronounced actress, and so she's going to be talking to us or with us about handling the press as a public figure. And closing off today's program, we're going to be talking about information disorder and the future of journalism with Jamaica journalist Mr. Halshane Burke, and we'll hear more about him as the time goes by. And of course, we close off with a spotlight feature. So we are in for a very interesting special edition episode today. And so we're looking forward to having you along with us, right? And now we go into our devotion. All right. So today's topic, and it's going to be very short, guys. It's not one of those preachy days for me.
That's true.
Today is hosting royalty, and today we want to thank our Daily Bread for this devotion. So we're going to be looking at Galatians 3 and verse 26. Verse 26 is the focus verse, but we're going to be doing verse 26 to 29. So 26 says, so in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith, right? In Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. 27. For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed yourself with Christ. There is neither Jew, nor Gentile, nor slave, nor free, nor is there male or female, for you are all one in Jesus Christ. If you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's seed. And here's according to the promise. Very powerful scripture. So after a meeting with the Queen of England at a ball in Scotland, Sylvia and her husband received a message that the royal family would like to visit them for tea. Sylvia started cleaning and prepping, very much like someone I know whose parents are going to be visiting them today, nervous about hosting the royal guests. So before they were due to arrive, she went outside to pick up some flowers for the table. Her heart was racing. Then she sensed God reminding her that He is the King of Kings and that He is with her every day. Immediately, she felt peaceful and thought, after all, it's only the Queen. Sylvia is right. As the Apostle Paul noted, God is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. 1 Timothy 6, verse 15. And those who follow Him Galatians 3 and verse 26. When we belong to Christ, we are heirs of Abraham. We are no longer bound by divisions such as that of race, social class, or even gender in Christ. Right. And verse 28 says, we are the children of the King. Although Sylvia and her husband had a marvelous meal with the Queen, I don't anticipate receiving an invitation from the monarch anytime soon, but I love the reminder that the highest King of all is with me every moment, and that those who believe in Jesus wholeheartedly can live in unity, knowing that they are children of God. How could holding on to this truth shape the way we live today? Again, how could holding on to this truth shape the way we live every single day? As we reflect on that, let's pray. King of Kings and Lord of Lords, you are mighty and glorious. Thank you for stooping down to love us and for welcoming us as your children. Today, as you go throughout your day, we want you to think about, what does it mean to you to be an heir of Abraham? How could you invite others to become a part of the family of God? You know, we're all one body, one people, different skin color. But in Christ, like the scripture says, God doesn't segregate us. He doesn't see us differently. We are all his children. And it's important for us to accept each other as children of God. Yeah, so that's our devotion for today. Short, sweet, and spicy, Jessie.
Yes, absolutely love that. So, what I'm going to get to is real quick the news, because I want to know what's going on. I know I want to share with you guys what's going on in New York, what's going on in Africa and the Caribbean. So, we're going to then pull up a front page of the New York Times. And I was going to read through some headlines and give you guys some information real quick on that. So, first up is the US to confront a glut of vaccine as early as May. I hope I said that word right, GLUT. As early as May, new pandemic dilemma. Weighing global scarcity versus reaching herd immunity at home. Washington, Biden administration officials are anticipating the supply of coronavirus vaccine to outstrip US demand by mid-May, if not sooner, and are grappling with what to do with looming surpluses when vaccine scarcity turns to glut. President Biden has promised enough doses by the end of May to immunize all of the nation's roughly 260 million adults. But between then and the end of July, the government has locked in commitments from manufacturers for enough vaccine to cover 400 million people, about 70 million more than the nation's entire population. Moving on, we're going to go to moving on from Stop the Steal, Far Right Now vilifies vaccines, exploiting a new angle to sow distrust of the US government. Adherents of far-right groups who cluster online have turned repeatedly to one particular website in recent weeks, the federal database showing deaths and adverse reactions nationwide among who have received COVID-19 vaccines. There also are children trapped in crossfire as war drags on in Colombia. Broken promises leave young at risk 5 years after a peace deal. And lastly, in Georgia, GOP fires first shots on voting battle, an emerging struggle. Biden calls new hurdles to polls. Jim Crow in the 21st century. The fight over voting rights is emerging as one of the defining conflicts of the Biden era, and Georgia fired the opening shot with a set of new restrictions underscoring the political, legal, and financial classes that will influence whether Republicans retake Congress and the White House. President Biden on Friday called Georgia's new law an attack on the Constitution and said the Justice Department was taking a look at Republican voting efforts in the state without offering any specifics.
Powerful, powerful, powerful. Thank you for that, Jenny. So we want to cross over to looking at the African news and the front page of the African news. We won't be getting into the actual news this morning. So I want to thank africannews.com for the news, providing the news on the front page. So we have reports. Report asserts the role of France in Rwanda's genocide against Tutsis. Fighting cancer with a mobile mammography unit. And this is happening in Uganda. How COVID-19 is hitting Madagascar's growing economy. Interesting. Domestic violence when men are engaged for progress. And social infrastructure development key to COVID-19 recovery. Interview. Going over to Egypt. Plans made to refloat ship blocking the canal. Victims of deadly train collision in Egypt to be investigated. And in Editor's Choice, we have green gold, avocado craze drives crops. Cameroon's Museum of War kept ancient. Africa forest elephants face growing risks of let me read that again. Africa forest elephant face growing risk of being
endangered.
Yes, my computer went down. Okay, so Egypt has a COVID-19 robot hospital. That's interesting. Interesting stuff to read. And those are just some of the things that's happening over there in Africa. And so, just to kind of browse and see what's going on in Africa. In the Caribbean, I want to thank Loop News Caribbean for what's on their front page. CAL offers COVID-19 test booking service to customers. Coronavirus cases in the Caribbean to date, 589,827. UWI Mona's Faculty of Science and Technology targets math phobia. I know I need to read that one. Mini parade of rescued young sea turtles released into the Gulf. £1,000 prize on offer for new Caribbean writers. PAHO, 21 countries to receive the COVAX shipment, and a taste of Money Musk rum's distinctively smooth. And of course, Loop Cayman, and this is the Loop newspaper group, wins PAHO CDB CBU, celebrating responsibility coverage of mental health and psychosis. White headmaster forces Haitian American boy to sit out classes. What makes Jamaican coffee so perfect? 2 Royal Caribbean lines to resume Caribbean cruises. And of course, still in the news is Clark's, as in the shoe brand, Clark's rekindles love affair with The Rock. And so that's what's on the front news for the Caribbean this week. A lot of things going on, Jesse. So many things going on.
I know. There's a lot I want to say, but real quick, I want to try Jamaican coffee. I haven't tried it, so I want to try it. Yeah, never.
Girl, you are missing out.
No. Ship it to me. That'll be good.
I know you're planning to come when you come, we just definitely go have some coffee. The Jamaican Starbucks has Jamaican coffee, so that's cool. All right, so we're gonna go to the part 2 of our news this morning, which is an engaging interview with Antiguan journalist, Mr. Garfield Burford. Last week, we looked at an introduction as to the responsibility of the media in light of the story of the royals. And so We spoke about the principles of journalism. Is the media creating the news or reporting it? And this is our interview with Mr. Garfield Burford.
Let us know what's on your mind. Follow, comment, subscribe.
We're everywhere. UME Radio app, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, iTunes, TuneIn, and all other digital platforms. Email us info@umeradio.com. On WhatsApp, 201-503-6731. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all at UME Radio. Follow me, Jessie, on Instagram at ink.jess, that's ink.jess, and on Facebook at Jesselyn Abel, that's JESSELYNE, Abel, ABEL.
And follow me, Marsha J, on all social media platforms at official Marsha J. Or you can just check out marshajnow.com.
Weekends on UME Radio with Marsha J and Jessie.
Amplifying the voice of positive influencers.
UME Radio. Positive entertainment 24/7. Subscribe on YouTube and click the notification bell.
Principles of journalism. Your first obligation is truth. Be transparent. Allow your audiences to make their own assessment of the information and draw their own conclusion. Your first loyalty is to citizens. Maintain allegiance to citizens and the larger public interest above any other. Present a representative picture of all constituent groups in society. Its essence is discipline of verification. This is what separates journalism from other modes of communication such as propaganda, fiction, or entertainment. Its practitioners must maintain an independence from those they cover. Be objective. It must serve as an independent monitor of power. You serve as watchdog over those whose power and position most affect citizens. It must provide a forum for public criticism and compromise. Accuracy and truthfulness requires that as framers of the public discussion, we not neglect the points of common ground where problem solving occurs. It must strive to make the significant interesting and relevant. It is storytelling with a purpose. It must keep the news comprehensive and proportional. Keeping news in proportion and not leaving important things out are also cornerstones of truthfulness. Its practitioners must be allowed to exercise their personal conscience. Every journalist must have a personal sense of ethics and responsibility, a moral compass. Thank you for listening. This was presented by UME Press.
All right, guys. So today we are heading off to part 2 of our awesome topic. Is the media creating the stories or reporting the news? Principles of journalism. So today we want to take a look inside the production of a news cycle and what that entails. The Meghan Markle coverage of the past few years, we believe, have exposed a vulnerability of us citizens when it comes to the media. Surely enough, some of us may be thinking she is wealthy, so should she expect it? But was it fair? After all, she is human, no? So we have a very special guest on our program that will shed some light on these issues. Garfield Burford is a renowned Caribbean journalist and have been for decades. He is currently the director of news, sports, and current affairs at ABS TV Radio, the Antiguan government media company. Garfield, welcome to Weekends with Marsha, J, and Jesse on UME Radio. We are so happy to have you. And before we begin our conversation with Garfield, let's take a look at the world exclusive published on March 18th by the website bylineinvestigates.com.
All right, so a private investigator hired by The Sun to spy on Meghan Markle and her father has apologized to the Duchess and the Queen. Yes, so this is as at March 18, 2021. The Murdoch red tape tasked the American PI to mine a huge amount of private information on Meghan Markle, her parents, and other family members, her ex-husband, and business associates. He used illegal methods and claims The Sun must have known this. But The Sun denied knowing they were commissioning unlawful activity and thus denying knowingly using the fruits of the scam. In part one of our their exclusive investigation, we reveal how the Sun Secrets operation took place shortly after Meghan and Harry started dating in 2016. The resulting tabloid frenzy eventually led to the rift between the Duchess and her troubled father. We named the Sun's Los Angeles criminal sloth for the first time as Dan or Dano Hanks. Now, he has said sorry to Meghan Markle and the Queen for his part in helping the tabloids to destabilize their families. At the time, the Sun's editor was formerly Daily Mail executive Tony Gallagher, now deputy editor of the Times. The company was being run once again by the controversial CEO, Rebekah Brooks. Brooks had been dramatically reinstated to her top job after being cleared of illegal news gathering at the News of the World, which she said she absolutely knew nothing about. And this was by Graham Johnson, editor of Byline Investigates. So the Sun hired a U.S. private investigator to target Meghan Markle and her father, Thomas. He used illegal methods, which he says the newspaper must have known about, not least, he added, because he had been carrying out similar unlawful inquiries for the Sun and other tabloids for over 2 decades. So the Murdoch paper tasked notorious Los Angeles-based PI, Dan Hanks, private investigator, for information through deception, including their social security numbers, a criminal offense in the US as it is in the UK. 6 of their private phone numbers were also gotten from a protected database, including Meghan's mobile. So within days, The Sun had published an article quoting an anonymous friend claiming that Prince Harry had bombarded Meghan with texts prior to their first date. The mention of the text traffic and anonymous sources are often relied upon as evidence of unlawful information gathering in ongoing litigation against Rupert Murdoch's tabloids. The court cases dealing with phone hacking and blagging personal data have been working their way through the High Court for over a decade. The fact that The Sun had Meghan's mobile number raises questions about whether the paper gone on to use it to obtain other phone numbers. However, there is no suggestion that any voicemails were intercepted by The Sun. Hanks also targeted Meghan's half-brother, also called Thomas Markle, and her mother, Doria Ragland. The Sun also tried to dig some dirt on the Duchess of Sussex by tasking Hanks to track down her ex-boyfriend and 2 of her rumored former boyfriends. But it appears that they couldn't find any scandal on the Suits actress and instead used Hanks' dossier to target distant relatives who snipped, or should I say, who snipped at her success.
Wow.
One was nephew, the son of her half-brother called Tyler Dooley, who was featured in Hank's report, but it is not clear that Dooley had any recent contact with Meghan Markle. Speaking exclusively to Byline Investigates, Hanks has made a public apology to the Duchess of Sussex for breaching her family's privacy and enabling the son to fuel the royal feud that has left deep scars. Hanks said, I am sorry to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry for targeting their family, particularly her dad, on behalf of the son. I never wanted to cause Meghan Markle harm and wouldn't have done the job if I had known it would have led to all of these problems. I also wanted to take the opportunity to apologize to the Queen because I realized the harm of what I did for the son has affected the entire family. All right, so this is just a very deep article sharing some insights as to at least one of a few things that we're going to be looking at tonight. But before we get in deeper into that, we have with us, as we said earlier, Mr. Garfield Burford. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. It's such an honor to have you here. You are such a stalwart in journalism, and we feel very privileged. So for those who
My
may
pleasure.
have...
My pleasure to be with you, Marsha and Jesse. Really, really appreciate it. And let me say good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night to your listeners, wherever they are in the world.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Thank
Sure.
you for that. Tell us a little bit about yourself, though. Who is Garfield Burford? Right.
So I haven't had to talk about myself much. I normally talk about others. But yes, I've been in the field of journalism since 1998. I've always wanted to be in communication. So from the days of school, which was St. Mary High in Jamaica, in St. Mary, which, by the way, St. Mary High is the premier rural school in Jamaica, easily, I mean, unequivocally. I say that without no apologies. So hi to all my St. Mary High, peers. Right, so from the days of St. Mary High School, I was always into communication. So whether it be oratorical contests, going to recite a poem in front of the school, anything like that in terms of speaking. So I always knew that I wanted to go into journalism. I started journalism while I was actually in sixth form at St. Mary High School. I was a community correspondent for Nationwide News with Cliff Hughes and at the time Faye Ellington in Jamaica. I worked with them for a little while I was finishing up sixth form. After that, I moved on to cable. I was in satellite television with Northeastern Satellite Services in St. Mary. Then I moved on to CBM television in Jamaica. Spent around 13 years there, pretty much went through the ranks from junior reporter into news editor, news manager, pretty much covered all the stories that could have been covered possibly in Jamaica. And now here I am in Antigua as Director for News, Sports and Current Affairs at ABS TV Radio. Pretty much covered pretty much a full gamut of stories, whether politics, finance, crime, environmental issues, developmental issues. I pretty much covered most of them. The most memorable moment for me in journalism, my most memorable assignment would have been covering the aftermath of the Haiti earthquake in 2010, which of course killed around about 250,000 people. That was really, really a shattering experience, and that would live with me for the rest of my life. I mean, so just seeing the kind of death and dislocation and the human suffering was extraordinary, and it had a huge impact on me. I think we were able to tell this story quite well and capture it for audiences back in Jamaica, myself and my camera operator. But since then, pretty much covered several other stories. Main interest would be development issues, also emerging as climate change as well, which is going to be the biggest existential threat that we face. I think even beyond the pandemic that we're facing now, that's a hugely disruptive experience for the human family. But the climate change dwarfs the impact of the pandemic. I mean, it has the potential of wiping out whole cities and so on, and disrupting lives in a way that we've not even seen, not even with the worst of this pandemic. So that is emerging as one of the big issues of our time. And so it has taken a lot of my attention as well, but pretty much covered the full gamut of issues and stories. And I think that I'm really happy to be here with you to discuss a story that is, or an issue that is really close to my heart in terms of journalism, the practice of journalism, and what I consider to be the absolutely inalienable tenets of journalism that cannot be in any way compromised. Those are the foundational aspects of what journalism is built about. For example, early in your introduction, you had it. Some of the issues of truth, accuracy, fairness, fearlessness. Those are some of the issues that I'm really happy to be talking with you about.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to kind of segue a little bit. In your professional opinion, how has the media landscape evolved and the way mass communication is being reshaped since social media?
Right. A very good question to start, Marsha. There's been such a metamorphosis in the way information is gathered. So back in the time before social media became a major phenomenon, people depended on air or the print. So it was a specific time for the news, let's say, for example, on television or radio. It was appointment radio or television. You tune in at a particular point and you listen for what was big in the news at that point. What has emerged now is instantaneous news, almost like fast food news, for instant gratification. People want information now. They're not going to wait until your next newscast, whether it be 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, that's too late. By 7 and 8 o'clock, whatever would have happened 2-3 hours before that is already almost stale news. You have to be advancing the story. You have to be trying to find new angles, getting details on it. So what has emerged has been a kind of dichotomy between new media, i.e. social media, with all its platforms, such as, for example, Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, etc., and Instagram. And then you have the traditional media, which continues to have to find a way to make sure that it is not totally usurped and eclipsed by social media. So while I mentioned this at a forum with the US Embassy in Jamaica about probably 6-7 years ago, and at the time, the media was discussing how do we ensure that we keep relevance within the context of a significantly emerging influence of social media. Because people want information now. And it almost, if the media is not careful, if traditional media is not careful, you could find a situation where they are eclipsed. They're irrelevant because people find a way to get their information on social media. So what traditional media has to do, it has to maintain relevance by having a social media presence, and that social media presence cannot in any way compromise the values and tenets of journalism, meaning double check, triple check, make sure that your information is accurate before you post it, because people, for example, influencers on social media, they have no such, sort of obligation. They have no such compunction. In other words, it is not significant to them whether or not they check the veracity of some information before they post it. They just post it, and their many followers will gobble up that information, share it myriads of times. And if it's not true, they just say, well, oops, that's it. The traditional media can't say that and is not in a position, doesn't have the luxury of putting something out and waiting for verification. We have to verify first. So it puts the onus on traditional media to get information quickly, get verification quickly, and compete in the social media sphere. Otherwise, it becomes a dinosaur, a troglodyte, it becomes stale news. So it has to maintain relevance in the social media space. At the same time, in the traditional media space, it has to maintain that level of investigative journalism, of long-form journalism, because social media has no such interest in long-form and investigative journalism for the most part. Their main job and their main obligation and the interest is to get information out quickly to satisfy the instant gratification culture that we have. Almost like fast food. You drive up to a window, you get your food in a minute or two, and you're gone. That's the way information is going these days. Something happens, you want a quick post, a headline, something that says, well, 5 people were shot and by the way, let me say, how horrible an incident it was in Georgia with the attack on those 8 women, most of them Asian American. And of course, now Asian Americans are feeling so unsafe, and it is reprehensible that they're being targeted in any way linked to, for example, the coronavirus. But you're seeing more violent vitriol these days around the world. But coming back to the situation where if that incident happens in Georgia, people aren't going to wait until 2-3 hours later for a newscast, that's preset, pre-timed newscast. They want information now, and they want it quickly, and they want a fair bit of facts. So that's where traditional media comes in. You have to make sure that on social media, on your social media platforms and pages, you provide that information, updates. So we can confirm that 8 people were shot. We don't know the motive yet. However, social media, let's say a sensational, lurid social media platform might jump with information to say, well, it was a racially motivated attack. Or let's say, or whatever the case is, even though they don't have it on any sort of strong evidence what the motive was, but they just run with the information on that. Traditional media can't do that. So they have to maintain that social media presence while at the same time for their on-air platforms, for their television newscasts and radio newscasts, they're working on details, getting information, gathering facts on the case, speaking with the people who are in the know and who would know the information, and ensuring that they feed their audiences with a diet of facts and not conjecture or hearsay or some sort of gossip, essentially. Because what a lot of times happens on social media is glorified gossip. I mean, if you haven't checked and triple checked and made sure the accuracy of the information, it's glorified gossip. And just permit me to say a very quick thing on this, Marsha and Jesse, that we have to make a distinction between traditional news platforms, between bona fide news platforms, and we have to make a difference between credible journalism, journalism in its true form, and yellow journalism, meaning sensationalism, hyperbole, exaggerations, creating eye-catching headlines just for the sake of getting readership or significant audiences. That's what a lot of media has created these days. And in fact, what you were reading at the top about, for example, the News of the World using very, very underhand tactics to get information, going into people, hacking into people's voice messages and so on to get information. The News of the World was guilty of that. But that was their stock in trade. That is what they wanted to do. That was their bread and butter. They were into creating these eye-catching headlines, yellow journalism to get readers, to get likes and to get shares. But credible journalism, which is worth its salt, cannot be engaged in that.
Okay. In that same breath, I was about to ask, what separates hardcore journalism from tabloids? Or are they one and the same now? Yeah. Should they be treated with the same respect and credibility, especially when it is the same news source or broadcasting company that is producing both?
Good question. So tabloid journalism is about getting headlines, getting eyes, getting readers. If it's, for example, newspaper, if it's an online platform, getting likes and shares and getting people to getting eyeballs, aggregating eyeballs. So it's about, a lot of it may not necessarily be false information per se, but it is certainly exaggerated. So I remember seeing, I'll give you an example, on The Star in Jamaica, which is a tabloid in Jamaica. It's produced by the Gleaner Company. Of course, The Star doesn't necessarily produce wrong information per se, but it tries to get readers' attention quickly to things because it wants to sell papers, right? Yes. So let's say there was one headline on The Star. I was driving in Kingston one day, and I saw one of the newspaper vendors selling in the traffic, and The Star had the headline, what's his name? The cartoon character, SpongeBob. SpongeBob shot and killed, or SpongeBob shot her, or something like that. Mm-hmm. So immediately I'm thinking, wow, I wonder if it had to do with the character whose voice comes across as SpongeBob, by somebody who never liked something that happened on the SpongeBob show. Mm-hmm. By the way, it turned out that some person a nondescript person in a community was nicknamed SpongeBob. His sobriquet was SpongeBob, and he was shot. And that's the story. So when you read the story, it never really matched up to how glorified and grandiose the headline was. So the headline is really trying to catch your attention, to grab you into it. But then when you read the story, you're like, okay, this is rather anticlimactic. Was this all? I mean, right. This is what I paid my money for, but by then you have already paid for the paper. So that's why the headline is there on the front page. They put the story about 2-3 pages down, so that you don't have time to, for example, look at it before you buy. It's about paying for the paper, buying the paper before you get a chance to read the story. Then you read the story, and then you're disappointed.
That's good.
Essentially, that's what. Sorry, Jesse. I just think essentially that's what tabloid is about: catching, aggregating eyeballs, getting your attention. The story might not match the headline, but it's about sensationalism, hyperbole. Not necessarily wrong information per se, but just trying to get your attention. Hardcore news and respectable news organizations, which are worth their salt, which has a reputation to protect, and the currency of journalism, of journalists with worth their salt, is their credibility. They live or die with their credibility. If they get something wrong, it takes away, you can take years to build your credibility. As a journalist, I've worked, as I said, starting in 1998. So this year makes 23 years since I've been operating as a journalist. I've taken that long to build my credibility, but I can lose it all. It can be shattered in one story I do that I didn't check properly, or wasn't fair. I didn't give both sides an opportunity to respond, etc. So you take so long to build it, and then you lose it. Long and short, the entities that operate both serious, hardcore news entities and news programs, and those that operate tabloids, I mean, there's a way around it. The tabloid is focused on aggregating eyes, like with the Gleaner. The Gleaner has a star, and it also operates the Gleaner, which is a respected paper since 1834, and it is also part of a group with TVJ and RGR. But they once they're able to segregate, to demarcate what they do on their hardcore news side, respectable journalism, long-form journalism, investigative journalism, following all the tenets, and what they do on the tabloid side, once they keep those separate, they should be fine.
Right. That's great. I have a question. When you brought up the hyperbole kind of headlines that news reports tend to do, do you see that we should have boundaries when it comes to reporting in mass communication and journalism? Do you feel like, I know you want a headline to catch the reader, but should there be boundaries as far as how much exaggeration should there be? And is there a positive space in journalism because people are seeing the negative side of things and not having factual information, and, like, as you said, fast food, social media?
Right. So should there be boundaries? You look, Jesse, at the news of the world, and you look what they were able to do. It's almost as if there were no boundaries. And sometimes their success in aggregating eyeballs and in getting readers sometimes bred a culture where there was almost an unconscionable quest to go farther and deeper into very suspect territory, meaning they were willing to push the frontiers even further, push the frontiers of what was acceptable. Because when you break into somebody's hack into their voice messages, yep. I mean, that borders on criminality. And in some states, in terms of cyber crimes and so on, that now becomes almost criminal behavior. So they were, and sometimes their success in getting readers, their readers wanted more. Their readers wanted them to get more lurid, more sensational. And that meant pushing the boundaries even further. I suppose their owners and editors were not willing to back off. They were not willing to come back from the precipice. They were willing to go further and go closer to the edge of the precipice, hopefully without falling off. There ought to be boundaries. I hope that even for those who practice yellow journalism or tabloid journalism, or who trying to get headlines through sensationalism, that they understand and recognize that there can be no benefit from hurting people, right? I mean, because there's no solace and there's no consolation in hurting somebody just to sell some more papers, and there has to be conscience in journalism. Because just like with the Hippocratic Oath in medicine, do no harm, journalism has a similar kind of rubric and a similar kind of ethos. We should not be doing any harm. In fact, we should be comforting the afflicted and afflicting the comfortable. So that's the kind of modus operandi that we have. In other words, those in positions of power, we should be constantly asking questions. We should be constantly holding them accountable, holding their feet to the fire. That's how we afflict the comfortable. But we should be comforting the afflicted by not adding to their sorrows, by not using their situation, not using their unfortunate situation sometimes to profit from it and to exploit it to sell papers and to get readers. But yes, you're absolutely right. There should be boundaries, but unfortunately, sometimes there have been no boundaries.
All right, so we have a listener question that just came in, and it says, so is it the reader's fault? Who is accountable for the truth?
It's certainly not the reader's fault in terms of the accountability for the truth. It has to be the publisher. So it has to be whoever is getting the information out. The burden of proof, the burden of responsibility, the onus is on the publisher to get the information out correctly, and to not only get the information accurately, but being fair, because there may not always be an intersection between accuracy and fairness. If I say, if I give half of the truth, yeah, I got part of the truth right. I was accurate in what I said, but I left out something that would have contributed to a fairer explanation of an issue. If I say, for example, the boy went to pick up the ball, ran across the street to pick up the ball, but I left out the fact that he actually had to do that because in doing that, he ran across not only to pick up the ball, but to save his little brother who was going to be hit down by a vehicle. If I left out that part, it made it appear that the boy was being reckless. So sometimes not just being accurate, but being fair and making sure that we get the response from both sides of an issue, not just getting from one side, because we want to give an accurate as possible picture and a fair enough picture so that the audiences will get an opportunity to come to their own conclusions. We can't and we shouldn't in journalism color people's judgment. Present the information, present all the facts, and the viewers and the audiences decide.
All right, so would you say that the coverage of Meghan comforted or afflicted her? And what are your thoughts on the Oprah Winfrey interview with Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, and Prince Harry?
Right, so let me take the first part first. The coverage of Meghan, not altogether surprising because it was done by, to a large extent, tabloid media. In other words, their job, like the paparazzi who were constantly on the heels of Princess Diana, the late Princess Diana, and who were even there when she went into the fatal accident. They see their jobs almost as not necessarily just reporting on an issue, but creating an issue, even when there is none. I mean, because their job is their only objective, their stock and trade, their raison d'etre is to sell papers and to aggregate eyes. So they couldn't care less whether or not they're afflicting people or making people uncomfortable. What it meant, even if it means that they have to be voyeurs and using private cameras and hiring private investigators and following people around and snooping on them, they didn't care. They couldn't care less. So it would be difficult to think that the tabloid media was trying to comfort the afflicted. Obviously, their job, Marsha, is to, as much as possible, get into people's faces, and for the most part, that is going to afflict people for the most part. So the coverage of Meghan, to a large extent, left her very, very uncomfortable, and I think she actually sought legal redress in some cases, and I think in some cases she actually succeeded in the legal redress that she sought, and good for her, because she should also, every person, irrespective of how public their life is entitled to some level of privacy, and they should be entitled to some redress if their rights are breached, and that's why we have the courts. So, in a way, understandable why the tabloid media did what they did and how they covered her, but Meghan also had a right to her reputation and to her privacy. As much as there can be a balance between the privacy of an individual and the fact that she's a public figure and a member of the royal family. But yes, I mean, it would be difficult to look at their coverage as being fair, balanced, because I don't think that was their objective. Their objective was to sell as many papers as possible, and that's what they went after. I think the second part of your question, Marsha, was what was my view on Oprah Winfrey's interview?
Yes.
It was, Oprah is very good at making people get comfortable so that they can talk in a visceral way about the issues that affect them. And she has a knack for that and a gift for that. And I think that this was on display. Again, I think that the premise of the interview was to have presented an opportunity and a platform for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to essentially spill their guts, for want of a better term, to really say what was on their mind, to really let it all out, to explain the travails, the challenges that they've had, the challenge, the contretemps with the royal family, the legal issues with newspapers who were hounding them. I mean, to really say what was on their mind. I think in that respect, the interview was very, very effectual, was very efficacious in getting them to talk. Just let it all out. On the other hand, there might have been other questions that could have been asked, which might have given a fairer picture of the situation. In other words, Oprah could have been played the devil's advocate. Because in other words, when you are, let me give you an example. When you are interviewing somebody who is just going to give their side of the issue, you sometimes as a journalist have to play the devil's advocate to ask them to almost to imagine, put an imaginary person there who was from the other side, representing the side of the other people. And you have to ask the questions that these people, had they been there, might have had an opportunity to ask. So on the one hand, good interview in terms of getting them to really viscerally speak out about what the challenges and travails that they'd faced, because I don't think that before anybody had an opportunity insofar as to get them to really open up like that. So that was good on Oprah's part, and it certainly landed her, an interview of the year so far, in terms of the eyes that it aggregated, significant numbers. I mean, we're talking about Super Bowl territory in terms of audiences, but perhaps she could have done more in terms of asking, playing devil's advocate, to have asked some of the other questions that I'm sure some of their detractors and some of their critics might have wanted to have asked.
Yeah. We have a listener question that just came in, and they said it sounds like and looks like as though a tabloid is like a possessed jackass on the loose, and they want to know who holds those tabloids accountable, or are there no accountability?
Good
because
question.
They operate under the banner of a tabloid, and if so, what really stops the multiplication of more tabloids over credible news agencies?
Right, that's a very engaged question, and we thank our listener for that. Right, so who holds them accountable? The issue of regulation, the issue of regulatory authority in the media has been a thorny one for a long time, and especially as media has exploded in terms of we're having the propagation and the proliferation of all these social media platforms. Essentially right now, there's been a democratization, a liberalization of information technology. So anybody can essentially go out and be a publisher. Anybody can essentially go out and be a purveyor of information. Whereas decades ago, it was just confined to a few people who had the cash and the capital to be able to start a news entity and be able to put up transmitters all over the place and broadcast. Right now, with the internet and voice over VoIP, anybody can essentially be a purveyor of information. So the second part of the question first for the listener is the propagation of these tabloids whose interest is in trying to aggregate eyes and to try to get as many people as possible to share and to like and to buy, if it's papers that they're producing. It's going to be difficult to stop their propagation. Who holds them accountable? In different jurisdictions, there are, let's be clear, people have legal redress in every jurisdiction. Once it is a self-respecting country, whether it's a tabloid, whatever they call themselves in terms of the nomenclature of the organization, if they publish something about somebody that's not true, then that person has the right to defend their reputation and has a right to their reputation and not have it tarnished and defamed. So there's always legal redress. But regulatory authority and modification varies from different jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because in some countries the regulation is a little bit more lax. In other countries it's a bit tougher. But you would expect that in the UK, with their culture of media regulation, that they would perhaps be pay a little bit more focus on the tabloids. Although you have to also bear in mind that there has to be a balance between freedom of expression and the freedom of these tabloids to publish what they want. But bear in mind that they know that they can go only so far, no more, because if they are sued successfully, it can put them out of business. So there's a fair bit of self-censorship as well by the tabloids, because they know that people have legal redress. But you would expect that, sometimes there has to be that balance between the right of the publisher to freedom of speech and the right of the individual to their privacy and their reputation. And that's where that intersection, the regulators come in terms of ensuring that, something was not tasteful enough, something was infringed on somebody's rights. So principally, there is the court in terms of the legality of it, but you would expect that the regulators are also paying close attention, especially in this age when we have a proliferation of social media.
Let me ask this question too. What then do you think should be the responsibility of the listener and the reader, whether it's tabloid or credible news sources?
Right. And that's crucial. Almost like caveat emptor, buyer beware. When you go out as a consumer to purchase things, you have a responsibility to check the sell-by date and the calories. And now, by the way, we're talking about front of labeling, hexagonal labeling of things, for example, products in terms of what is high in salt or high in sugars or high in fats or whatever. The consumer, in the same way the consumer has an obligation and has a responsibility to check what they're buying. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. The consumer of media content should also be mindful of what they're consuming. Because sometimes, whereas the Romans taught us that, I suppose, viscerally and historically, perhaps harkening back to our distant past as Homo sapiens, we have this lust somehow for blood and gore. And so that's why we have the gladiatorial games in Rome, where people would just go and, that was like, it was like the opium of the people. Karl Marx said religion is the opium of the people, of the masses. In Rome, the gladiatorial games was like the opium of the people. No matter how many problems the people had, they were hungry, they couldn't get social services. When they went to the gladiatorial games, they forgot about all their problems. And so the emperors had these to take the people's minds away from the problems that they had. In the same way, the tabloids seem to satisfy that lust that people have for gossip, for information about other people, for just the quickest information, instant gratification, the culture of wanting to know now and wanting to know about, for example, celebrities and people like in the royal family, like the Duke and Duchess of Sussex and so on. So the tabloids recognize that and they try to satisfy that thirst and lust that many people have for that level of information. But the consumer of content must also be discerning and must also check to see what is the reputation of this paper or this online news source. Do they have a reputation for checking their facts? Or are they always apologizing or retracting or correcting or updating? And if they really want information that is solid, that is properly checked by bona fide journalists who have a reputation to defend and whose stock and trade is their credibility, then of course, I'm pretty sure that consumers of content know where to turn in their respective countries. They know which are the respectable media entities who know that they have to get it right all the time, as opposed to the tabloids who might just be sensationalizing just for a headline. So generally, yes, Marsha, the responsibility and the onus is on viewers as well. Viewers, consumers of content, listeners, readers, social media, people on social media, to be discerning and to check what their source of information is. In the same way a consumer has to check when they go into the supermarket.
I have 2-in-1 kind of questions for you, Garfield. So I want your point of view of the media coverage of the Duchess from their engagement to the wedding and now the escape from the palace. And 2, how do you think the royal institution could leverage its leadership to mitigate the excessive nature of the tabloids, potentially negatively impacting on the people it covers? Because I feel like now we're at a time in history, especially, let's say, the royals, where everything is open and they have the opportunity to be upfront and not follow, use the right words.
Tradition? The tradition?
Yes, not follow the tradition, yet they're still bound by it.
Yes. And that's a tricky one, Jesse, because in this age of where everything, as you said, is open, people want information and they want it now. And where there is demand, there will be supply. So where there is, and the tabloids are just satisfying what obviously is a demand in the market. So in addition to the respectable, well checked out, properly sourced information, there is that space and that there is this demand by people who just want some information about people, who want sensational information. And you know about this game that we used to play in school called Chinese telephone. Some people used to call it, they call it different names, where the teacher whispers and, everybody's lined up in a line around the classroom. Teacher whispers to one of the students at the one end of the line. Information goes around. You can't go back to check what you heard. You just have to pass on what you thought you heard. And by the time it goes around, you sometimes know what the issue is. Completely different situation. And the teacher now announces what he or she said, and the last student explains what he or she heard, and it's an absolutely totally different situation. So obviously there is that room for that, and the tabloids do it. The royal family, perhaps, if I could give them free advice, need to realign their public relations strategy to the contemporary world. After all, there are significant traditions to follow. Traditional, the royal family has its own sense of its own place in the world, and sense of its own responsibility to be public and transparent and open. But it has to understand that this is a new world of transparency and openness, where almost everything is readily available and accessible in terms of information. So it has to, as I said, realign its public relations and media strategy in line with that. Doesn't mean that it's going to come and have a press conference every day, but perhaps it can head off. It can do what is called almost preemptive public relations by heading off some of the challenges even before they are big deals. Perhaps they have to change with the times, because if you don't change with the times, you become a troglodyte, and you become ancient, you become outdated, you become antiquated. And I'm pretty sure that the royal family, and by the way, that's how some people saw the Sussexes, as being able to perhaps be that bridge, be that intersection that could be a bridge between the traditional, the orthodox, conventional royal family, and perhaps a glimpse into the future of a royal family that's a little bit more different, a little bit more open, a little bit more open-minded, and open to the world. Perhaps, and that's perhaps, they were seen as agents of change, harbingers of a kind of change, where the royal family was able to moderate its position in terms of not just being, seen to be a closed institution, but being able to respond. But so perhaps they could head off some of the challenges by being a little bit more open, perhaps. But of course, that's up to them. That's a decision for them to make.
Yeah. We have another listener question that came in, and it says this: the tabloid writers are from within the very public, and I assume, they monitor analytics and position their stories to tap into the buyer based on the readership. What does this mean for us as a society that watching the sharks of the media world onslaught such attacks on humans, then watch them bleed, and in addition to that, have their dogs feed on the blood within a clearly protected network, if that makes sense? It is just extreme to me, and yet allowed to happen.
I think I missed a part of it, Marsha. If you could I know it's a pretty long intervention by the reader. That's the first part again. I just want to get the essence of it. I think I missed part of it along the way.
Sure. So the listener says the tabloid writers are from within the very public, and they monitor analytics and position their stories to tap into the buyer based on readership. What does this mean for us as a society that watching the sharks of the media world onslaught such attacks on humans, then watch them bleed, and in addition to that, have their dogs feed on the blood within a clearly protected network? It's just extreme, and yet allowed.
All right, that was some powerful imagery being conjured up by the listener there. I mean, the listener should probably also do some writing on poetry. That was some powerful imagery. because it almost reminds me of the poem, The Second Coming by W.B. Yeats. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. The anarchy is loosed upon the world, the blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passion and intensity. By the way, that's my best poem from W.B. Yeats, William Butler Yeats, one of the finest poets of the 20th century. But anyway, good imagery, good conjuring up of the imagery there. But I think it captures to a large extent how the tabloid media operates and how yellow journalism operates. By the way, the term yellow journalism goes back to the 1800s, when there was this, bit of a fierce tussle between the New York papers, jostling for readership and position and so on. So it was a matter of who could outdo the other in terms of headlines and sensationalist stories. And I think it emerged from that, and it has become even more entrenched now in our society because of its instant gratification. The analytics is a powerful point, because the tabloid papers and publications can look, for example, at their readership. And when they put out a story, they can see which story has traction, which story has the most readership. And they can now tap into that and then look at trend analyses and say, if we put out more of these stories, let's say about the royal family, or let's say about prime ministers and their spouses, or let's say about the lavish intentions of people in authority and celebrities, they realize that this sells most. They're going to zoom in on that. I think that's what the listener was trying to talk about. They put out this information, they have their trend analyses, and they realize what really sells, in other words, where people gravitate towards. And then they have, of course, they give the people more of that. The same way the gladiatorial games used to happen. When they realized, the emperors realized that people wanted to see, let's say humans going up against tigers and lions, and people love to see that. They said, let's give them some more of that. Let's give them more of that. And I think that's what the tabloid media really has, that's its stock and trade. And that is what it thrives in. And I suppose that's what sells the most. There will always be a market for that. The issue, as you mentioned earlier, Jesse, is the issue of boundaries. As a listener asked, where are the boundaries? And I suppose where there's demand, there will be supply. It must come back down now to issues of our sensibilities and our sensitivities as a society. And I think that's where it also comes down to. In other words, the readers can also push back, and they can also determine, and they can also mold where the media goes, because they can also, by their own feedback and their repulsion to something, they can also send strong messages to the tabloid operators to say, look, that's not acceptable.
Yeah. And speaking on getting in control and talking about the media and us readers and consumers saying what's not acceptable, I would love to know your opinion and comments on Piers Morgan and his comments in regards to Meghan, and which led to him walking off stage.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Piers is known for speaking his mind. He's known for being sometimes controversial. This is not his first controversial incident. There is a difference, however, between opinion journalism and factual news journalism.
Right.
The issue was whether or not the show that he was on, Good Morning Britain, was what it saw itself as. In other words, at the time, did he see himself as giving an opinion, and did he feel like he was entitled to give an opinion? Or was he, should he have known that the nature of the show did not lend itself to that? Let me give you an example. Fox News is known to be, for example, leaning right in the US, leaning Republican.
Yeah.
CNN sees itself as more centrist. MSNBC sees itself as more centrist, but really MSNBC and to a lesser extent CNN are perhaps a little bit more left-leaning than they perhaps will admit. But they will see themselves as centrist. But let's talk about Fox. Fox has, and when Shepard Smith was at Fox, he's now at CNBC, Shepard Smith had great news objectivity. He had great content. he gave the news as it was. Didn't favor Republicans or Democrats.
Yeah.
You could argue that Fox News and Shepard Smith and that style of journalism was antithetical. In the end, it was almost inevitable that Shepard Smith would have had to leave Fox because of the nature of what he did and how he did it.
Yeah.
But there are people like Tucker Carlson on Fox who are going to say their mind. His opinion. He's going to tell you his opinion. And his opinion is most times, 9.5 out of 10 times, will align with Republican values and Republican sensibilities and tendencies. However, when they do their news is generally seen to be straight down the middle. That's their news journalism. But when their opinion journalism comes in, it's a different situation. So I say that to say, I haven't really watched a lot of the Good Morning Britain show to know whether or not Piers Morgan figured that he ought to have been in a position to express his opinion, or whether or not he ought to have known that the show was more news-oriented. But either way, it does appear to have been in poor taste, what Piers did. Because you don't want to necessarily go down that road on a controversial issue like that. If you have your opinion on it, he might have his opinion about whether or not Meghan was talking the truth. But there's a time and place to say it. And what he would have done, what he ought to have known, just pragmatically, that he was going to alienate significant numbers and significant sections and segments of his audience by saying that. You don't want as a presenter to be alienating significant numbers and segments of your audience. And he must have known that, forget about the ethical side of things, that pragmatically, just in terms of the practicality and the numbers of it, you don't want to alienate people by saying, because he must have known that Meghan Markle would have had significant support in Britain and elsewhere. That's why so many people watch the show. Of course, she has her detractors. Of course, she has her critics. She and her husband, the Duke. They have their critics, but they have their supporters as well. By him saying that, he alienated a significant level of his audience. And I'm pretty sure that the show producers would not have countenanced that. So he would have had to go. His position became untenable. So I don't think any presenter should set out to go to alienate their audiences. It just doesn't make sense. And I think what he did was to alienate his audience. Did he have a right to say, was it a suitable comment for the show? Again, as I said, he must have known the nature of the show, whether it was a news or opinion program. But as I said, even if he figured that that was an opinion segment of the program where he could just say what was on his mind, he ought to have known that he would have alienated a significant level of the audience. So in other words, it was counterintuitive and counterproductive what he did.
So we're talking about what happens when reporters or news organizations become the news. So let's talk now about Cuomo refusing to report on his brother, who currently is serving as governor of New York.
Yes, and it's
what are your
Cuomo.
thoughts? Yes,
Chris Cuomo, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? He's very tight-lipped about not saying or reporting anything on his brother.
Right. I had a discussion recently with somebody about the same thing. And this is where it comes down to straight ethics of journalism. It is said that Caesar's wife must be beyond reproach, meaning that perception is hugely important in journalism. Whatever Chris Cuomo, and by the way, let me say I agree with him, because no matter what he says and no matter how he reports it, the perception will be there among some people that he is not reporting it fairly, and he's not being upfront, that he's not being comprehensive, and that somehow he's hiding things because he's his brother. So, in other words, damned if you do, damned if you don't. In other words, that's the position. It's a zero-sum game if you were to report it. He can't win. Yeah. If he tries to be objective and to show that, see, I'm straightforward, even though it's my brother, I'm going to report it, the perception will be, to a significant level of the audience, I wonder what he's going to hide now because it's his brother. And people know, by the way, the kind of very playful contretemps that they have. When Andrew was on Chris's program, I think I watched it 2 or 3 times during the pandemic last year. By the way, when Chris was also afflicted with COVID-19. He and his brother had, interviews and so on. And they were very playful and jovial, and they would jibe at each other about what their mother doesn't like and who was doing this in the house and who's their mother's favorite. So they have a very good relationship, even though they jibe at each other and so on. So if you were to come out and pretend to report on the issue or give the impression that he's being absolutely fair and balanced on this issue, he has all to lose and nothing to gain, because the perception will be that he's holding back something, he's not saying something fairly enough. So remember, it's a 24-hour network. There are other programs, and other programs on CNN have been reporting on the issue. In the same way that in journalism, the ethics of journalism dictate that if you have a vested interest, if you have some sort of holding or interest in a matter, you can say to your editor that, look, this person, I've had a professional or whatever other relationship with this person. So if I were to, and people know, so if I were to report it, it might come across as if I'm going to be biased. I'm going to be tilted in my opinion and in my reportage on the issue. So it is important to declare that and say, look, would there be a problem if I were to report this? And most times your editor will say, well, actually stand down on that one. We will assign this to another reporter. In the same way, let me give you an example. Recently, I was doing a newscast and there was a story about a woman who breached quarantine and was fined a very hefty fine because the judge wanted to, send a message and to really make an example of this person, because other people seem to have been very flippant and facetious about it. So it turned out that my co-presenter, it's the person who he knows, and they might have gone a way back, might have been, gone to school together. And I noticed that it was his read, and I noticed that he never called the name. So I was there, and the presenter didn't say to me before, it didn't explain that he had known this person and so on, and he would rather not read that story. So I'm there sitting beside him, and he's reading, and he doesn't call the name of the individual. The name was in there about 2 or 3 times in the script. He said the person, or he said the woman. He never called the name. So during a break, I said, and by the way, when it came to my read, I back announced and said, by the way, the name of the person in that story is so and so and so. So I said it because I wasn't sure. I was thinking to myself whether or not he wasn't sure the pronunciation of her name or something. So he left it out. During a break, I said, what happened? Why did you choose not to say the name? He said, he kind of joked about it and said, it's somebody who he knows. But I said, no, but you can't do that. You ought to have said it before. You ought to have said it to me before. And that way I would have gladly not had you read it. I would have read it myself because I have no sort of vested interest in the story. I don't know the person. I'm just reporting this as any other story. So I'm pretty sure that the editorial board and the senior news staff at CNN would have had this discussion with Chris Cuomo, and he would have explained the situation to them, and they would have agreed with him that it's a zero-sum game if you were to ever report it, because again, the perception would be that he would not be fair and balanced in reporting it. Leave that to other people like Don Lemon, like the other news programs, and they have been reporting it. Even today, I saw a reportage on the issue because I think there's another woman who has come out to accuse Andrew Cuomo. So other presenters will be able to report it, and the perception that they are going to be biased will be much lower than if Chris Cuomo reported.
Wow. And then we want to also look at, thank you for that. And then we also want to look at Sharon Osbourne's conflicting comments on her show, which led to the entire show going on hiatus after she defended her friend and fellow talk show host, Piers Morgan.
Yeah,
so let's have a conversation about that.
Right, I saw that as well. Again, there has to be a demarcation or distinction between what's an opinion show and what's a news program. A news program must be devoid of opinions. The concept of news and opinions, it's diametrically opposed. I must never give my opinion if I'm giving news. The news must be absolutely straight down the middle. I must give you the facts. You make your own judgment one way or the other. That's news. opinion programs is taking the information that is in the news, the facts, the information, and coloring them, adding your own experience, your own opinion, your own judgment of the facts, your own assessment of people's actions or lack of actions. That's opinion journalism. So if this show was really about people giving their opinions, then that was fair comment. I mean, I think she had an opportunity and she was in her right to defend whoever she wanted to defend, and in this case, Piers Morgan. I think what really led to the show going on hiatus is that they had such a strong argument about it that they came across as being adversarial, and they came across as probably not being able to practically work together on the show. So I think right now the station is trying to figure out how best to move forward on this, because if these two had such a heated argument and were such almost at daggers drawn, almost at contretemps, then it would be difficult for the audience to see them possibly having some sort of reconciliation. So practically, it does appear that the kind of heated discussion and testy exchange might have been what would have been the real cause of the thing. Not necessarily per se the defense of Piers Morgan per se, but what emerged out of that. That might have been really what. But from what I saw, it might have been what would have led to the postponement of the show, having it on a hiatus.
Okay, well, we have two listener questions in the chat box. Jesse, I think you wanted to share this.
So the first one is in regards to Chris Cuomo and his brother. And the first one is, if he is doing objective journalism, why does it matter if he wins when the report is not about him? And in regards to Sharon Osbourne, they said, so shouldn't the rest of them, I'm assuming the other co-host on the show, have the right to their opinions towards Sharon just as she has hers towards Piers?
Right. Okay, let me take the first one first. So in relation to Chris Cuomo, the concept of being able to be credible, the concept of credibility rests on, to a large extent, people's perception. So in other words, if people perceive you to to be hiding some information, because this person is somehow related to you or close to you, it is going to take away from the extent to which you can confidently, credibly get the information across to the audience. So if there are other shows on the program, on CNN, on the channel, that can report this issue without the burden of that perception always being there, then let those other shows report on the issue. Because, as I said, that perception is going to be the 1,000-pound elephant in the room. I wonder if he's telling the truth about this. I wonder if he's really coming across as being honest about this. So there is no benefit per se in him reporting it when there might be this perception anyway, especially if there are other shows that can report on this issue. As I say, this is something that I'm pretty sure that he would have had a discussion with his senior news executives at CNN about, and they would have come to the realization and the conclusion that it is fair that he not touch the issue at all, because of what is going to be seen. And I'm pretty sure he would try to be as objective and as down the middle as possible, because I'm pretty sure that he's a professional. He would try to be absolutely professional about reporting on his brother. Mm-hmm. But he could not escape the perception that he is not being honest, transparent, and objective with his brother about his brother's situation. So the perception is going to be a detracting and distracting element and construct in the whole reportage on his brother. Mm-hmm. Why have that as the elephant in the room when you can avoid it and have others report on the issue as they have been doing? Secondly, in relation to Osbourne, Sharon Osbourne, and whether or not she should have the other presenters would have had their right to their own opinions of her as she did of Piers. It's fine to have your opinion of somebody, but it's going to, how will the audience be able to, will they be able to work together practically going forward? That's the real issue. I don't think the issue is whether or not what their opinions are per se. It's the issue of how they dealt with articulating their opinions and how they dealt with the issues that they had. In obviously there's some bit of animus and bile there, and possibly that's what the station is trying to work out. How do we get them to actually work together going forward? I don't know if that they're confident that they would be able to work together seamlessly and harmoniously going forward. Perhaps that becomes the real issue. It's not, so I'm saying, I don't think it's necessarily per se the opinions that she articulated. And therefore, it would not necessarily be an issue of whether or not the other presenters had a right to their own opinions of Sharon, as she had of peers. It's, can they work together going forward, given what they had as a virtual, cost off on the program.
Wow. Well said. Well said, definitely. As we wrap up this interview, Megan, in her interview, going to go back a little bit. With Oprah, made a very important observation. We believe when she stated that the papers were creating the news and not reporting it. Do you see that happening? And what would you say about that, especially when it comes to credibility and ethics in terms of hardcore journalism? We know for tabloids, that's the thing. But when it comes on to what should be hardcore journalism,
you say is do I think that in respectable news editors?
Yeah, do you see that happening?
They're creating the news as opposed to reporting it?
Yes.
There would be an antithesis there if they were doing that. If they were doing that, it means that they would not be respectable journalists worth their salt, and therefore they should not be called hard-nosed, hardcore journalists who are worth their salt, who are investigative, who are paying a significant and unalienable focus on accuracy, truth, fairness, balance, equity, and getting the story right. If they're somehow trying to create the news and to somehow be sensational, then they could not be considered to be that. So by virtue of that, it's like an oxymoron. You can't, in the same sentence, say you're a hardcore, hard-nosed journalist, but at the same side, you're also trying to create the news as opposed to reporting on the news. What journalists do is to report the news fairly, factually, honestly. If they do not know something at a particular point, they say, we have been checking on this, we have not gotten the information yet, but what we can tell you is this at this point. We know this for a fact. Or if we did not see it with our own eyes, we have been told by somebody in authority who should know that this is what happened. Eyewitnesses say this. Let me give you an example. In covering so many different police shootings in Jamaica, they're always controversial. And by the way, in Jamaica, when there's a police shooting, everybody sees. Everybody knew, everybody was there. If there's a homicide where a gunman killed somebody, nobody was there, nobody saw anything. So you understand the dynamics there. So when there is a police shooting, sometimes what is at play is that you have elements who are furtive, elements who are in the shadows in these communities, in these tough, gritty inner city communities, who will push the women and so on forward to come out to create a scene and to give a particular impression that the police were at fault, the police were callous, the police were cold-hearted, etc. And so these people, even though they weren't there, they saw it. They'll tell you what they saw. And when you question them, when you start to question them, you realize that they really weren't there. And then they'll start to deflect and tell you, ask that person, because, but I said, but hold on, but you said you were there. Didn't you know? I mean, and then they start to deflect. Point is this, when we go onto those scenes, we have to be in a position where we are going to get both sides, right? Because we know the dynamics at play there. Everybody saw that the police shot the person in cold blood, person didn't have any weapon, person was an angel, and shot in cold blood. If you carry that side without any sort of response, and without trying to do any sort of additional digging and background checks, you're going to accurately reflect the position that is expressed on the ground. But you're not going to be fair because you would not have had covered all sides to a story. And all sides to a story doesn't only mean two sides. In that case, it doesn't only mean the community, the people in the community who said they saw, and the police. It will also possibly mean social workers in that community. It might also mean people who were working in the church community, who had been doing some social interventions. They might also have a significant input in the story as well. So the bottom line is, respectable news organizations worth their salt will know that they have to be honest, upfront, fair with the facts, and as I said, fair with the facts, making sure that they do not give up, they're not tendentious in their reporting. They do not give a particular impression, right? To make it seem, to make people have a particular view of somebody or something. They present all sides fairly, factually, honestly, transparently. And if they do not know something, they indicate at this point, we do not know this. We're checking on this, we haven't got the information. But they do not try to guess, to conjecture, to try to assume, to try to suggest, and to put things together when they might not be together. On the other hand, tabloids and those who practice yellow journalism have no such compunction. They have no such obligation. They can essentially just get you with the headlines and create a particular impression. If you want to, they know what they're doing. When they put a headline there, they know exactly what the objective that they're trying to achieve. And most often they achieve it, because all they wanted to do is to read a headline, click on something, share it, or if it's a physical paper, to buy it.
True. All right, so we have 3 more questions, 2 questions from us, and then we have a listener question, which Jessie is gonna.
All right, guys. Hey, Marsha.
Hey, listen, this morning has been highly informative, and we will continue with that interview in a moment, but it's very important at this point for us to cut and just kind of have a conversation with another guest that is in studio with us today. We should have 2 guests joining us, but let me say this first. Now we're going to kind of have a conversation about information disorder and the future of journalism, right? So for some, journalism once served the public, providing citizens with information they need to self-govern in a democracy. But now the journalism of the past has been decimated by economic and technological challenges. The revolution has caused tremendous dislocation. Earlier, definitely, we spoke about the main principles that journalists can agree on as laid out by the Elements of Journalism by Bill Kovach, right? So journalism's obligation to the truth, its first loyalty to the citizens, the essence is a discipline of verification. Its practitioners must maintain an independence for those they cover. It must serve an independent monitor power, and it must provide a forum for public criticism and compromise. It must strive to make the significant interesting and relevant, and it must keep the news comprehensive and proportional. Finally, the practitioners must be allowed to exercise their personal conscience dealing with fake news. It can be argued, and now we turn our attention to a little bit on information disorders. So distorting facts, manipulating information, sharing information without understanding the consequences, verifying others' beliefs and faiths, and running behind propaganda and fake news with or without vested interest in some kind, right? So Claire Wardland Company first researched the publication about the different types of information disorders, right? And it's categorized as 3 kinds. So there is disinformation, which is propaganda, misinformation, malinformation, which is real information, but it's really taken out of context. So humans are considered the wisest and the most intelligent living beings who have the capability of differentiating right and wrong. Despite these strengths, and many are influenced by these information disorders, either knowingly or unknowingly. It affects us all, Jessie. It really does. In the room right now, we have with us a very special guest. His name is Mr. Halshane Burke. So happy to have him this morning. He is a trained radio broadcaster for 20 years Yes, 20 years experience as a journalist and having worked with REFM and at Radio 2, which is now Hits 92 FM in Jamaica, West Indies. He is also a recent graduate of the University of London with a Bachelor of Laws degree. Good morning, Mr. Burke. Welcome. I don't think we're hearing you at all. Mic check 1, 2.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burke, for coming on our show this morning.
Not a problem. Good to join you. I'm just going to share what I'm going to share adds value to what has already gone forth. You know, I was listening to the interview with Garfield, and I'm thinking, if you have such an erudite and astute person on, what you need with me?
No, you're also one very astute person. I am 100% sure.
You can only add more value. Let's just put it like that. You can only add more value, Mr. Burke.
Yes. All right. So I have a couple questions. But the first one is information disorder has crept into the credibility of journalism. So I want to know from you, how important or critical is it that we appreciate what is news from sensationalism?
It is very important that we understand the dichotomy that exists in the world today, because there is a sense of I want to know and I want to hear and I want to see, and there is this desire of persons to always want to know what is happening in other areas, in other people's lives, and that sort of thing. And what it lends itself to is a distortion, as was said before, and a diluting of what should be critical information, what should be seen and appreciated for the value that is news, which is information that is propagated about what is transpiring, what is reality, rather than something that seeks to foster or engender a sort of emotive response. You know, you allow the reader, the listener, to come up to their own conclusion, give their own emotions, rather than you, as the sender of the message, wanting to create that. And I think what is important, particularly in news organizations, is for there to be a balance that is struck to say, all right, I'm going to give you the information and then you draw your own conclusion from it. You come to some understanding of it, but I'm just going to give you the facts as it is without bringing myself into it. You know, they said that you don't want to become the news when you are delivering the news. So I think we have to draw a line and to understand, especially in this time when everything is at your fingertips.
Yeah.
If you want to find out about something, you Google it.
Mm-hmm.
You go online, sometimes you don't even elicit it, but the persons who you are connected to will send you information about, did you see this? Did you hear this? You know, this is what is happening there. And immediately a wellspring starts off, and then there's a snowball effect and everybody is on this thing. And before you know it, the what should have been a simple news item or information item, it turns out into something far greater and far different.
Mm-hmm. That is really true. And I know when it comes to sensitivity, there's a lot of sensitivity in journalism itself, you know, and the types of articles and informations that's out there. In your own words, how important is it that we correct the approach to, you know, probing and wanting to know more about sensitive issues?
I think we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person to see, would I want my life on the big screen? Would I want my life at the fingertips of every single person who has a smart device? Would I want my life on YouTube and every social media platform that there exists? And then if we can say, well, yes, I want my life out there like that. And I don't mind you coming into my bedroom and into my closet and into my space, my personal private space. Then fine, go right ahead. But I'm sure, and I think I can speak for most persons, maybe 99.9%, that we don't want that scrutiny. We
Right.
don't want that searchlight to be on, because there are areas in our lives that we hold dear and we hold personal and we hold private. And there are some things that we haven't even told a soul.
Yeah.
Probably only the pillow will know, and the walls. So if walls could talk and the pillows had a Twitter account, I am sure they would be blazing up what is transpiring. So we have to understand that the same level of sensitivity that we want for ourselves is the same level of sensitivity that anybody else would want for themselves. And to appreciate that, though you have persons in the public sphere, whether they be celebrities, whether they be politicians, whether they be members of the royal family, for example, as has been discussed, at the core of who they are people.
Yep.
They are people with feelings, they are people with emotions, they are individuals like everybody else, and they share similar sentiments, the same emotions, the same respect that we would want. Is the same respect that we should give other persons. Sure, some persons have chosen to be in their respective spheres, which brings spotlight onto them, and or they were born into it, such as the royal family. But it is not a choice to invite people into the bedroom. But what it should do is bring scrutiny to the work that is being done, to the position that they hold, to the respective um, engagements that they would do based on their job description, and not necessarily on the color of their bedroom or what food they like to eat or that sort of thing. And I think there has to be some level of respect that is given, sensitivity. One of our former prime ministers is now in hospital. And I know that persons are anxious to hear what is happening and want to know. And if they could be at the door of the hospital room, I'm sure that they want to do that. But at the end of the day, we have to be careful that we do not cross the line between wanting to know and then going too far and being invasive in another person's experience and their lives. So it is critical that we examine it first and foremost. Would I want what I am asking of other persons? And then be mindful that has to be a separation. There is the individual, and of course, there is the role, the public role that the person has to play.
Thank you.
Well said. Well said.
And I know there's a listener question that just came in, and this person said, what are some of the issues that you as a journalist can admit to where reporters are concerned? What needs to change? And another one asked, for your opinion, is the coverage of Meghan journalism or glorified gossip?
All right. Let me take the first one. There are subconscious biases that we all have. And these come from our experiences or past or family background or upbringing, that sort of thing. And we have to check those. We have to check to see whether or not we report on an issue and it is being colored by how we think about it, what our experience was about it, what transpired in our lives about it, as well as there are the gatekeepers. There are the editors, there are the producers, there's the business owners that also have a role to play and responsibility to play. But in the whole sphere thing, we have to, when we put all these things together, we have to be mindful that we are not there to serve ourselves. We are not there for us. We are there for every single listener, every walk of life, every background, every strata of the socioeconomic ladder. And so what we have to do is ensure that when we say that the sun is shining, we are not saying the sun is shining because we like it. And then when the sun is not shining, we don't bother to report on it. But we have to be mindful that we are there to serve the public. And we are in the best interest of everybody. We are to say what exactly it is. And also examine our own subconscious biases. that might come to the fore in our reporting and in our understanding of different issues. Now, as it relates to Meghan and Harry, personally, I believe that there's some element of news value, but I think by and large, there is a lot of sensationalism that is going on because it's the royal family. And there is a lot of mysticism that surrounds the royal family, and persons are intrigued by their lifestyle, intrigued by the centuries of history, intrigued by the traditions, intrigued by the closed doors that persons aren't able to see through. And over the years, what has happened is that little by little, there are cracks that are appearing in the wall to give persons a peek. And what that peak has done is to pique the curiosity and to know more. And so what has transpired is that people are more now wanting there's an appetite, oh, I want to hear more, I want to know more, that sort of thing. But what has to be carefully understood is that a member of the royal family is a person, as I said before, is an individual, and the royal family is a job, a job like any other job. It might be a little bit different, but it's still a job that they do. And so there has to be a demarcation. What is it that I want to know? Is it because they remember the royal family and I want to know about their personal life and what's happening and what Harry like and what Meghan like and that sort of thing? So I think to a by and large extent, there is a lot of glorification that is transpiring because of the mystique that surrounds them.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We have another question coming in. Oh, well, we have a comment first. So the media is like a raging bull with no competition. Thank you so much, entrepreneurs, for that. And Coach Raquel chimes in with a question. Does the church have a role here? Are souls valuable to lose here? Are they even positioned to compete with the negative messaging? I'm just wondering.
The scripture tells us that we are to be the salt of the earth as people of God. And we are the ones, if you have ever had rice that is not salted, it is not a flavorful experience.
True.
Yeah.
And so as believers, as Christians, as people of God, we are called upon to influence. I like to use this term that we are to be the thermostats rather than the thermometers. The thermometers only tell you what is happening, but the thermostat sets the temperature. And we are called to set the temperature in things. Now, one of the drawbacks that we face is that the platforms that we use are not necessarily as penetrating as it should be. Yes, there are avenues such as this, and I give God praise for you guys and for what you are doing, and I pray that you will reach far and wide. But the platforms that are most popular are not the ones that are propagating the word of God. And there's not the appetite for the people to really want to hear the word of God and what God is saying. But there is a role to play. There's a role and responsibility. And you know what is interesting? God has provided the internet and media platforms that can be used and should be used, but we are not capitalizing on it. Some time ago, somebody said that we have more in this day and age, but we are not being as effective as we should be. And I think that is one of the critical things that we have to examine. Are we being effective as we should be? And we need to use all platforms, all available resources to ensure that people understand and to mitigate the effects of the negativity that is surrounding us, because every single day negativity surrounds us. But there is still positivity that needs to be given, that there is positivity that needs to be preached, and preach not only just word of God, but preach in terms of sending the message so that people understand and get a wholesome view of what the true situation is.
Good point. We have also watching with us Apostle Faith Walters. Good morning. Thank you for joining us as usual. Every single week she's here. She says, pique the curiosity. I like the thought. Nosy people are noisy people. Like I said, many of them do not have lives. And in continuation, Coach says, yes, to the question you were answering, but how can you have influence if you are absent? Right? And we have Chopreneur saying, is it that appetite is not there or churches refuse to tap in and transition?
I think there's a mix of the two things. There are some who have the appetite but don't have the drive. But I think I think John Maxwell says that we have to set the temperature, set the pace. A leader, and this is what I want to zero in on. Leadership is important. The role of a leader, as I've come to understand, is to chart the best course by defining reality, deciding how to achieve the intended goal, and then own the outcome. And a lot of leaders are not defining reality, not charting the best course of action, and not willing to own the outcome. I dare say that there's a lot of lazy leadership within the churches because there is more that can be done and should be done. There are avenues. We are facing a pandemic that has reorganized, restructured, reintegrated us into how we do things, how we interact with each other. And yet still there are many who are not utilizing it for the best interest or for the glory of God. And I think we have to be mindful of what we are and who we are, and that God has given us a responsibility. Now, when the scripture tells us to go on the highways and the byways, back in those days, they didn't have internet, social media, Twitter, that sort of thing. Today, we have those. Those are our new highways and byways that we need to capitalize on and galvanize so that we can ensure that the word goes out. You can sit in your living room in Timbuktu and speak to somebody all the way in Japan. And you don't even need a translator because the platforms provide the ability for you to communicate with somebody of a different language. So I think we need to address that from a leadership standpoint to say, what are our leaders doing to ensure that the resources that are there are utilized? And it does not take a whole lot of money or personnel. What it just takes is the will to execute.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So we have Mindfulness in Ministry Masterclass. Churches must understand that all days of waiting for people to come to us to minister to them have passed. We have to be as aggressive, strategic, and creative as the enemy, right? Apostle says, to some extent, the church has not capitalized as much. That's why we still have so much sick people out there. Much hasn't been transparent. Masterclass says the quality of the church output is really nothing to be desired at the moment. The enemy is working hard and the church is sleeping. Have appetite, no drive. I like it. Coach Raquel says will and commitment. Wow. There's so much to be said here because just by using this whole medium to in a unique way, it's not standing around a pulpit preaching, but it's actually awakening awareness as to our consumption of media and journalism and our responsibility, their responsibility, and things like that. So with that being said, Hal Shane, where do you see the future of journalism?
There are two schools of thought on that. You have the traditional, to borrow from my good friend Garfield, and you have the contemporary. And what has happened is that there is a gradual decreasing of the buying of the traditional, and there's a more of the buying of the contemporary. Now, what is the contemporary? The contemporary is the Twitter, is the Facebook, is the YouTube, is the social platforms that people use to voice, to send out an opinion, and they sell it as gospel, sell it as fact. And there's not a lot of fact checking that goes on. So Like, for example, somebody would say, there was an accident and a man died down the road. And then I tweet, there was an accident down the road, man is dead. Turns out there was no accident down the road. Turns out nobody died down the road. But then there's no fact checking. So that information goes out to my 10,000 Twitter followers, for example. And then say 50% of that reshares it. And then before you know it, you hear that there was a massive accident down the road and 12 people are dead as a result of the accident when nothing like that transpired. And so what is going to have to happen is that there has to be a rethinking of how we consume information, how we treat with information, how we handle information. Because the tool in the hands of the wrong person will do great harm. But if a skilled person has the tool, great things can happen. And I think what is transpiring today is a lot of people have the tools and the tools are there for good, but they are being misused, mishandled, and abused. And some are naively doing so, thinking that they're doing good, but there are some who are being malicious in how they do things, in how they propagate information, in how they share information, in what they say and how they say it.
That's important to note. I know you have to go, and I still have some information coming in here. All right. All right, we're going to share that information in a bit. Apostle Walters says more of this is actually needed, and that's absolutely right. Apostle, I have a question for you. Last question, perhaps. I said last question before. Before you let us know how we can connect with you as a journalist. All right. So we know that you're a journalist. We know that you're a man of faith and so on. What would you say to churches who are, maybe they're not in the public journalism field, but talk to us about the thoughts of starting a media ministry that includes proper journalism. Is it something you would encourage, or, leave that to the professionals who went to do their degrees and their masters and things like that? Kingdom journalists, talk to us about your thoughts about that.
Well, first thing is that we have to understand who we are and where we are. There are people of faith in every single sphere of life. And as I talked about the subconscious bias before, but we have to understand that that is part of who we are. And that has to be brought to bear in everything that we do. It's not something that we can take off and put aside and say, all right, I'm a journalist right now, so God, you take a back seat right now. I'm going to deal with you after I finish doing this. Everything about us has to be filtered through who we are. And our perspectives has to be influenced by that. It would be wonderful, awesome, tremendous if as people of God, we come together and say, you know what, let us start our own thing. It would be awesome. As a matter of fact, I would encourage it. Because we are not void of talent in the kingdom. We are not void of resources. To be honest and to be frank, the resources are there. But there has to be a coming together. Somebody said there has to be an ad idem. There has to be a joining of the minds to say, okay, let us achieve this. Because first and foremost, although there are many different labels, you have Church of God, you have assemblies, you have this, you have that. But at the end of the day, we are going the same place. We are going to glory.
Yeah.
There's not one section for assemblies. There's not one section for this. There's not one section. It's one place. And when we join that choir in glory, and I do believe there's an awesome choir in glory, we are all going to be sitting beside each other. And we're not going to be worried about label, because label won't matter at that point in time, because we'll be people of God. And I think the crux of the matter is for us to understand that first and foremost, we are God's children, and that whatever He has given us, it's for us to use for His glory. And so if it is that we are able to galvanize and come together and start a radio station, a newspaper, an online publication, or whatever it is, then all for it. By all means, let's get going. Let's get started. let us get the word out. Let us use what we have and what God has given us to give him glory and praise.
Definitely. And we want to spotlight GFIHM Ministry and WAMA Ministries that have been transitioning online, and there are two of our partners. It's just amazing to see how churches are, for those who are, they're actually taking it seriously, you know. There's a project that we had started earlier. It's called the gospel. The gospel must go on. The gospel must be preached. And to see churches actually, and I don't think it was an easy transition, or it will not be an easy transition for every single faith-based organization. But the fact that they're moving and they're doing it, and these are churches that are in the US, in New York, you know. And so we want to also join with Mr. Burke and just say to leaders that are watching, if you have not yet transitioned, make the move, right? Like he says, the internet and the digital space are the highways and the byways where the gospel should be taken to, and it should be taken seriously, especially in this time where there's so many things happening. Aside from the royal story, yes, you have the vaccine, that's an issue. You have travel, issues in travel, issues in technology, you know, and our young people especially that have gone to school to be educated, bring back that knowledge into the kingdom, and let's see how we can come together and how we can ensure that, you know, we are edified, we are educated, we are empowered as kingdom, because there is a stigma that is attached to church. There's a stigma, especially churches in third world countries, where persons may think that, oh, you know, when it comes down to God, it's different from being a serious business person, or different from being, you know, serious about life in general. You know, there's a sort of mockery that is happening, but we want to debunk all myths, and we want to let people know that there are people that are serious about this, and the level and the quality of everything can match that of those in the secular world. Wamo says the tool in the hands of the wrong person can do great harm, but imagine if it's in the right hands. Can you imagine the impact? Apostle says, on point, we're all going one place and not separate areas in heaven. Amen and amen to that. Mr. Burke, thank you so much for being with us today. We know you have to run. And we're looking forward to having you again. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And, you know, thank you for just sharing with us your heart, sharing with us the facts, and encouraging us as we go along on this journey.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Jesse. Have a wonderful day. God bless you both.
Yeah. And sorry, how can we connect with you? How can we connect with you?
You can connect with me. I am on Twitter at Hal Shane Burke. You can reach me, Facebook, Hal Shane Burke. Listen, I am not as social media savvy as some people are, but you know, I'm on that platform, and from time to time, I send out my thoughts on what is happening as well.
And that's important. Please connect with Mr. Burke. Definitely, I know that he's a good resource person. If you are, because sometimes we have college kids on and they're doing media and journalism, reach out to him, ask him questions, pick his brain on thoughts. You know, this is a current affairs / family show. And so we want to make sure that we're making the connection. We connect you with resources and persons that will help you to grow and help you to become the best version of yourselves. Have a fantabulous day, Mr. Burke. And thank you again. God bless you.
God bless.
Well, Jesse, this morning has been absolutely something else. It started off interesting. We're in the middle of the show. It's still interesting.
Yep.
Yes.
And our viewers absolutely love it. And I think, you know, I think this message is absolutely really important, especially when we talked about with churches and like transitioning online and having a plan and a success plan, because who's also online, which is young people, you know, and you want to build the church for the new generation. They may not want to go to brick and mortar, but they need the word of God, you know, or online may have had that transition of, okay, I really like this church. Let me, you know, go to their actual, you know, building or tabernacle, whatever you call it, and connect with more people. You know, they may be afraid to do it by themselves and go, but once they start online and have a few friends, then they may want to, you know, do the real thing.
Definitely, Jesse, definitely. And speaking of empowerment, what you're looking at on the screen now is UDMI's free ebook. And this ebook, every single week we come back and we talk about it because it has valuable resources to help persons transition from what you just said. Free. It's actually free. It's a free ebook.
It's free.
So
Yep.
it helps you in your transition from perhaps brick and mortar to the online space, and it's easy to understand. 51 pages of awesome information right at your fingertips, set your business objectives, things like that. We do have persons that are very gifted, and somehow it seems, Jesse, that we separate the gift that God has given us from actually being good stewards over it in terms of packaging it and presenting it
Right.
and making sure that there's a spirit of excellence that is attached to it. And
Yep.
so this free ebook is there to help to guide you and give you like a quick starter as to how to do that, how to set that up. How do I position myself as a kingdom person? And definitely we find more and more persons, because of loss of job during the pandemic and things like that, they're going into their own thing,
Right.
and these persons sometimes they are not quite educated as to where do I mean, yes, information at our fingertips, Google and so on, but it's one thing to actually have the information online, but then to coordinate it and
Right.
put it in a format and a structure that is going to help you to grow, because it's your gift that makes room for you.
Yep. And to
Right?
use it and to actually activate it. Because, like you said, a lot of people have the info, but they don't take action to actually do it. You could have all the info there about email marketing or like setting up a website and everything like that. But until you get to it, you're like, oh, this is a lot. I need help.
Yeah, and that's where the power of networks come in. And in studying the Jews and the Chinese, for us as a network within the UDMI network, we realize that most persons generally try to go at life alone. But no man is an island. Let's just put that out there. Even in business, nobody is an island. And so you need a network that will help you to get the job done, to help you to get the message out there, and just allow your business to thrive and to grow, and just to be the best that it can be. So we welcome persons to jump on the website and definitely look at our free ebook and ensure that you make use of the opportunities that are there. We have Brand Share, which is the US version of the network. We have Business Tree, which is the Jamaican leg of the network. And so once you grab that ebook, it's going to give you all the information that you need. This station is about empowering 1 million people through many things in any area. So don't think that, oh, I'm not in journalism, so I can't be a part of this. And, all the excuses, forget the excuses. We're just here to help you reposition yourself for this time phase, for this period. We don't know what tomorrow is going to hold, Jesse. So guess what? We have to all get on board today.
Exactly. And that's right. UMEDigitalInc.com.
UMEDigitalInc.com. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. All right, Jesse, where do we go next? Because we are winding. It's 11. No, Jesse, it's 11:01.
It's 11:01.
Can you believe that?
I know, but I do know that, I do want to continue that interview. We have a couple minutes left.
Okay, hold on. So before we continue that interview, can we just, since this is the last week of the Royals that we're featuring, I feel like we need to do the Because We Can segment, and then we close out the show today with the rest of the interview. So philanthropy, is important because it provides opportunity, and philanthropy supports projects and endeavors that may be too unpopular or controversial to gain the widespread support of general public or even the government. And so for this reason, philanthropy is an important part of a democratic society. And today we just want to have a quick conversation about Archwell Foundation. We're going to pull up the website in a quick minute. So as you know, that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have gone through a lot. Yes. Yes, and now they are pretty much disconnected, but they started their own foundation and they have named it after their son Archie. Right? And that word is Greek for source of action. And well, as in Archwell, plentiful source or supply, a place we go to dig deep. And so we want to thank archwell.com/about for the information that we are about to share. Right? So Archwell Foundation is the organization founded again by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and it currently includes the Archwell Foundation, whose purpose is to uplift and unite communities, local, global, online, offline, one act of compassion at a time. Isn't that beautiful? And then we have the Archwell Audio, which is a podcast exclusively on Spotify. They have 144 million people in terms of premium subbies. Big up yourself.
Yep.
And 320 million monthly active users. And this is their Archwell Audio podcast. Awesome. And then there's Archwell Productions. And in Archwell Production, they use Netflix and partnership with them to inform, educate, and inspire through the power of storytelling to embrace shared humanity, duty to truth, through a compassionate lens. So they unleash the power of compassion to drive systematic cultural change. And they do this through nonprofit work within the Archwell Foundation, in addition to creative activations through the business verticals of audio and production. Jesse, I find this so impressive because when you think of a foundation, you're thinking, oh, okay, so we go out and we're hands-on on the streets, we hand out meals, or we clothe those who have no clothes and things like that. But here they are tapping into technology, tapping into, production, and they're doing what they're doing, and they're great at it, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, everybody likes to listen to regular audio or regular radio, but when somebody subscribes to premium, that's a whole different conversation.
And they got 144 mil?
144 mil on premium.
That's the whole.
Listen, I am so proud of this couple. I'm so proud of all that they're doing and the grace and class with which they are handling their situation and the things they are putting in place. My God, you know. So just to give a quick shout out to the Royals this morning, you know, Meghan and Harry, God bless y'all. Keep doing what you're doing. We see you, we hear you, and we feel you. And now we're going to go back to the rest of our interview as we close out our weekends with Marsha J and Jesse. True. All right, so we have 3 more questions, 2 questions from us, and then we have a listener question, which Jesse is gonna read. So my 2 final questions are, have we lost the construct of news reporting due to the compelling need to keep up with sales? And what happens when the news organization and reporters become the news?
Right. Okay, so let me respond to those first. So have we lost the construct and concept of news because of sales? The moment that happens, it will be a dark day in journalism. Journalism is a hallowed profession and vocation. It is about ensuring that we honor the foundational tenets of journalism. We are the people who stand when 2 sides are fighting. We stand on the wall and tell you the lay of the land, what the situation is, without giving you our opinions on it. The moment we cede that professional authority and credibility and ethos, and we cede it to the almighty dollar, as I think some have, but I think when it happens en masse, that I think would be a dark day. That would be nothing. It would be tantamount to journalistic apocalypse or journalistic cataclysm. It would be. It would mean that it would spell the end of what would have been a golden age of journalism. There are those, and thankfully, but I don't see it happening, Marsha and Jesse. Thankfully, there are enough journalists who are faithful to the concepts and construct of fair, balanced journalism that cannot be bought or sold. That there is a clear demarcation between the editorial and the sales aspect. Meaning, let the salespeople do their job, let the editorial side do their job. There has to be a demarcation with that. And sometimes I've seen cases. I've seen one particular case where a former colleague of mine, they said about 2005 or 2006, a former colleague of mine, when the entity I was with had a radio and television station. I was in TV, my colleague was in radio. He was carrying a story, and that story was well researched. He did his investigations about, I think it was coming on to Christmas, and there was a particular company was advertising its sorrel that it said was from real sorrel, not from concentrate. And it turned out that my colleague did his own investigation, and he found out that that was a false claim that the company was making. And there happened to have been what I consider to be an unholy intrusion by sales onto the editorial side. And my colleague's story didn't get to run because the company used its clout, the fact that it spent significant levels of money with the company, and put some muscle, put some financial muscle and corporate muscle on the company, and essentially strong arm the company to say, if your reporter carries that story, then there goes our contract. And the company caved. You know, my colleague was crestfallen. He's devastated. But that was a very stark example of when there can be sometimes this unholy intrusion of the two. They should always be separate. The other side of whether or not, the other question, Marsha, was the second question was, remind me, please.
What happens when the news
Reporters
organization and the
news.
reporters become the news?
Right. It happens sometimes, and if it happens, it should not be on their own behest. It should not be their own engineering. They should not engineer it. If it happens naturally in the flow of things, let me give you an example. The BBC, one of their journalists in Myanmar, who has been reporting on the situation in the capital, Naypyidaw, he was taken into custody by some, does appear to be thugs. And they're now trying to, as you know, as you and your listeners know, the Myanmar military has taken over power in a coup, deposing Aung San Suu Kyi, who was the democratically elected individual, state councillor, and she's now under house arrest and so on. And they're declaring martial law. They're literally shooting people in the streets, using very brutal tactics to crack down on the protesters who are anti-coup protesters. The BBC's journalist in Naypyidaw was taken into custody. BBC is desperately trying to reach out to the military authorities there to try to find out where he is and that he's safe. And so it is in that kind of situation, the BBC has come out, and their director for global news has come out several times on their newscasts to make appeals for his safety, for the safety of their correspondent in Myanmar. In those kind of situations, when the reporters and the agency becomes the news, it happens. It's okay. In other situations where the agency becomes the news, as in, for example, when there is incorrect reporting. Let me give you another example. The BBC has had to update and amend a story that it carried about Antigua and Barbuda having a variant of COVID-19, when that was not true. The BBC picked up a story that was a post that was put out on Public Health England, suggesting that two people who had traveled briefly to Antigua and Barbuda and returned to England had some, hitherto unknown variant, and they call it the Antiguan variant of COVID-19. Turns out there's no evidence linking the variant to Antigua and Barbuda. The BBC has had to amend the story and has had to indicate that the Public Health England has put out information subsequently that there's no link between them. When news organizations like the BBC, which is still the gold standard of being fair, balanced, and accurate, when they get things wrong, it is their responsibility, non-negotiable responsibility, unequivocal responsibility, indubitable responsibility to get to correct it as quickly as possible, because that's how they protect their credibility, because it shows that they're not infallible. No news organization is infallible. Sometimes they get things wrong, but and it's not trying to be sensational or anything. It might just be that the source that they were depending on, which is usually impeccable, this time is not impeccable. And they get things wrong. They must correct it, amend it, and atone for it. And people, as I've said earlier, have their access to redress, the legal redress. They can sue and win, depending on the kind of whatever the jurisdiction they're in, whether it's common law jurisdiction where the Reynolds defense and the Reynolds principle takes precedence, or whether it's a Sullivan principle, as in, for example, in Jesse's case in the U.S., where the Sullivan principle is what dictates, where the burden of proof is on the person who is claiming that they were defamed to prove that there was malice. In the Reynolds principle, it is really about the publisher of the information, the burden of proof being on that publisher to prove that their information was accurate or was in the public interest, or they had qualified privilege, or it was fair comment, or so on. So generally, there are cases where things are, the news entity or the reporters become the news, but it must not be something that's engineered to put themselves in the public light. They should be in the middle, on the fence, reporting, not trying to get into the spotlight.
Well said. Thank you so much.
I have last two questions here. So the first one is, it would seem as though the tabloids are more powerful than media organizations that are actually held accountable to credibility and fairness. Is this not lopsided regulations? And the last question I have for you is, what drives your work in media? Your personal purpose or mission? And do you think on this when you're carrying out your work? And to what esteem do you hold yourself?
Right, good questions. Let me answer the first one first. Is there some sort of inequity in the regulatory framework governing tabloids versus traditional news organizations, which are, consider themselves to be self-respecting, that stick to the facts and stick to evidence and investigative tenets? Depending on the jurisdiction, they may be, because as we've said earlier, there are different legal and regulatory arrangements in different jurisdictions. So in some jurisdictions, it is. In some jurisdictions, there is even no regulatory authority. And the only redress that people have is really going through the courts to defend their reputation if they were defamed. So there is a need in different jurisdictions to look at the regulatory framework. In Jamaica, for example, there's a broadcasting commission which does a fair job, but it has the nascent social media, new media phenomenon to deal with, which is a little bit foreign to it, that it really hasn't gotten its head around how to regulate that sphere. It regulates the traditional media organizations, television and radio, because that's when it came into being, that was really what the landscape was. But the landscape has changed dramatically. It's now a lot of new media and social media. So even regulators now have to be adapting their regulatory regimes to ensure that they're able to respond and that they're able to regulate well those entities that are there. So there is that element as well. In relation to so long and short of it, it might be a little bit lopsided. I do agree. It might be a little bit lopsided. I think I might have lost. Are you still seeing me, by the way?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
we're still
good. Right,
seeing you.
right. For some reason, I think I lost my screen. But anyway, the other element was this: what drives me personally, and to what extent do I hold that as a torch in front of me? It is my sense of passion for the field I'm in. That this field is sacrosanct to me. I hold these, you see, essentially the Declaration of Independence in the US, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, among them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I hold these truths to be self-evident, that we have a responsibility in journalism to report factually, because information, a free media, is the oxygen of democracy. It's been said, not my statement, but it is an absolute truism. It is the oxygen of democracy. It gives light and life to democracy. So our job as journalists, reporting fairly and factually, is absolutely crucial. It is quintessential if we are going to have a knowledge-based society where people make informed decisions. People must make decisions based on facts. And whereas the new media phenomenon has really, put the onus on traditional media to get quicker with outputting their facts, such as through social media, their social media platforms. Mm-hmm. We cannot compromise. We cannot sacrifice facts and accuracy on the altar of speed and expediency. So those two have to work hand in hand. We must be speedier with getting information out there, such as on social media. Traditional media cannot cede the social media space to social media influencers and people who have no interest in trying to get facts and to investigate and to do double and triple sourcing. But at the same time, while traditional media is trying to also put their information out there quickly on social media, they cannot sacrifice accuracy and fairness and balance on the altar of speed and expediency. And so I see that as my raison d'etre, the sine qua non of what I do, that I must contribute to people making informed decisions by being presented with the facts. And that is essentially what I have, what has really driven me. In the over 20 years I've been a journalist reporting, via radio, via television, via online. It has really been that push to always be accurate, always be fair, and always give people an opportunity to make informed decisions based on those facts. So, I encourage everybody who is in the field of journalism, especially young journalists coming up, to have that as their raison d'etre right in front of them. Never lose sight of that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Burford. We have a listener comment. It makes you want to thank Trump for calling out fake news, since it seems that this is the only route to counteracting or protecting against this new age reporting. And we want to also encourage our listeners, viewers, to keep commenting. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know what you're thinking, because this is not just something that will affect a group of persons or one person. Journalism affects all of us. How we see the world, perception, extremely important. So you're inside our news segment on Weekends with Marsha J. and Jesse, with a very special guest today, Mr. Garfield Burford, who is a renowned Caribbean journalist. Sir, thank you so much for joining us this morning for this very special episode. It was very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Inspiring, yes. Educational.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And I hope it was thought-provoking and insightful. I hope that it really got your audiences to think, and to perhaps be a little bit more discerning, to understand that there are those who are purveyors of information whose sole purpose is to get their attention. It might not always be with the facts, and it might not always be with the full picture. It might not always be with a complete picture. That they perhaps have to also compare their sources and to try to get information from different sources, not just one source, but to try to, if they see something on social media, to just try to double check it with a respected news source, to just see whether or not quick check to see whether or not anybody else is reporting it, to see whether or not it's even true. Because unfortunately, so many people have been killed by fake posts on social media, meaning people claim falsely that people have died. And only for that information to be proved to be false, that the person is very much alive, and then all of a sudden you see these people start to share this information that somebody is died, but the person has not. So importance for the audience, the consumers of content, just as though you're a consumer of goods, you go into the supermarket and you buy food, check it, check the date on it, make sure that you're getting a good product. In the same way, as consumers of content, check to make sure that you're getting a good content, and also compare and contrast and check other sources.
Definitely. We have some more listener comments as we wrap up. It sure was insightful. It actually put some respect back into media for me, one person says, and this is very timely and necessary. This lets me want to be more intentional and careful with what quote unquote news I consume. We get lax sometimes and just take what we get instead of demanding the best. Definitely, we know that there are a few persons out there who may have, before this interview, watched the news or listened to the news mindlessly, but no, with all of this information packed in this interview today, definitely we're going to be watching the news, bearing in mind all the little pointers and all the little things that we need to ensure that the information that we're feeding on is information that is factual, and it is positioned where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Where
Absolutely.
it needs to be.
My pleasure being with you, ladies. Really, it is fascinating. And perhaps if I have more time, we can do it again another time.
Definitely.
Yes, I love that.
Yes,
All the
have a
best.
wonderful day, and thanks again for stopping by.
You're very welcome, and all the very best to you and your listeners. Take care.
Listen, Jesse, this is not one of our regular episodes. If you are an avid listener of Weekends with Marsha J and Jesse, you know that we skipped over quite a few segments deliberately because we felt like we have an obligation to our audience in all 70 countries. And all of you that are listening this morning, I think I saw the numbers went up to like over 500, and that's just one platform. To just empower you in this regard, just let you know how important it is, just as how you are particular about your communication, particular about your circle, your interaction. There's a school of thought that says you are the average of the 5 closest persons to you. That's exactly how you have to be particular about information that you digest. Right? And along with that, you just have to know what to look for, how to look for it, what are the responsibilities on all sides, the responsibilities of the journalists and the responsibility of you, the consumer, because especially during this pandemic, Jesse, I tell you, we have been gullible to some things.
Yeah.
We have been gullible to some things, and our behaviors have been manipulated by things that we are seeing and hearing. And so, it's important that we know. It is so important that we know. We have gone 24 minutes outside of our segment, and we want to thank everyone, our team on the back end, for being so patient with us this morning. And we just want to say a quick hello. We have Shelly-Ann from Michigan that is watching. We have Havarine. Thank you so much. I see, yes, really great job. Wow, great job, ladies. Travelpreneur Escapades, that's just with us every week. Coach Raquel, we could not feature our segment this morning, but I promise you, right, Jesse?
We'll do it next week. Got you guys.
Definitely. I want to read some of the comments just for encouragement. Encouragement. Hold on, I just saw some things a while ago. I don't know why I'm not seeing it now.
Oh, yeah, mine just.
Media has power, a whole lot of power. We should be concerned. This man is highly informed, experienced. He knows his stuff. Really great expert. And I can't see everything. I think my phone is just.
I got one. I don't think we credit real journalists enough. We expect the news, which we do not pay for. Sometimes we don't know what we have until it's lost.
True. And we have Apostle. She had to say goodbye, but she says, Minister Marsha and Jesse, double portion of blessings. I thank the Lord for these 2 women. Listen, we're so happy to serve you in what we do. It's just who we are and what we do. And so with that being said, Jesse. Yeah, we sighed at the same time. It's time to go.
Oh.
It is time to go.
Guys. I'm not gonna be sad because I know that we are here next week for you guys. So we will see you guys. I want to say thank you so much for just being with us and your comments and questions. I absolutely thank you guys. Thanks the partners. Thanks all of our supporters out there. I really do love you guys from the bottom of our heart.
Definitely. We do hope that you were inspired, motivated, educated, as is our goal. So this is Weekends with Marsha J, where we amplify the voice of positive influencers. Join us each and every week right here. Yeah, as we do what we do best, and that's just glorifying God with our gifts and talents. Take care. God bless you, and see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Weekends on UME Radio. Get the UME Radio app.
Are you ready for the weekend?
Oh, yes, girl. Get your cup of tea and mic check, 1, 2. I am so ready
To inspire, motivate, and educate. Weekends on UME Radio. The sun is up, and so are we.
News, interviews, hot topics. Connect with us. Let us know what's on your mind. Follow, comment, subscribe.
We're everywhere. UME Radio app, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, iTunes, TuneIn, and all other digital platforms. Email us info@umeradio.com. On WhatsApp, 201-503-6731. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook, all at UME Radio. Follow me, Jessie, on Instagram at ink.jess, that's ink.jess, and on Facebook at Jesselyn Abel, that's JESSELYNE, Abel, ABEL.
And follow me, Marsha J, on all social media platforms at official Marsha J. Or you can just check out marshajnow.com.
Weekends on UME Radio with Marsha J and Jessie.
Amplifying the voice of positive influencers.
UME Radio. Positive entertainment 24/7.